Shalom. Thank you for joining us as we take our fourth look at what a spiritual community is to us. It's a great joy that I bring you this last lesson in this series of a spiritual community because it tells us about Tikkun Olam. What is Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Olam is repair of the world, an incredibly positive, beautiful, but very large concept. And it's related directly to spiritual community and being a righteous spiritual community. So we've looked at in the last three lessons all of the things that make up a spiritual community. And today we're going to talk about how when we practice this spiritual community, we affect not only ourselves, our neighbors, our local communities, but the world in this positive way in which we can actually repair the world. And we start off with the basic understanding of our tradition, of the Semitic holy tradition of meditation, and that is that we're all connected in this unified field of pure consciousness. We're all connected, whether we're aware of it, awake to it or not, whether we like it or not, we're all connected. And in some way, on the surface, in the relative experience, we can see this connectivity in nature all around us. There's all of these biotic communities in nature, in our backyards, in anthills, in streams, in rivers. All around us, everything is connected. And we know we're connected by the process of photosynthesis, air, everything that we do. So in a biological, in a physical sense, we know there's this mutualistic, symbiotic relationship. And that's the essence also of the spiritual existence of the unified field of pure consciousness, where we're all connected. So the first step that we've discussed in each and every one of these lessons is diving deep within and becoming awake to that pure consciousness, that unified field that's within us. And once we do that, when we perform action, remember we say Yogastha Guru Karmani, established in that unity, perform action. And as we do that, we become awake and aware of our connections with one another and nature all around us. We are awake and aware to the symbiotic relationship we have. And all of these biotic communities in nature are connected. So there are individual communities like we have in the human sphere of existence, and then in the animal sphere of existence, and then in every single biological sphere of existence, there are all of these communities, but they are not exclusive. We're all connected in a very real way. And this is the teaching of our masters of the holy tradition from time immemorial, that unity, the teaching of unity. First in all of the paths, 32 paths, the understanding of that connection through the unified field of pure consciousness. So as we tap into that within ourselves and begin to acknowledge it within our family and our friends and our neighbors and begin to practice that community, the connections come alive. So what we're told in our tradition is there's all these pockets of communities throughout the world. And when those communities are awake and aware of the connected nature of that unified field of pure consciousness and practice it using the golden rule and meditation, individual and group meditation, the energy comes alive in all of those conduits and magic happens. And that's how the world begins to repair from the level of consciousness. There's no need to run to every single continent, to preach peace, to preach anything. What we do is we tap into that peaceful field of pure love, pure consciousness and bliss within ourselves, and we practice it with our neighbors. And then that energy ripples out through these conduits to all of creation. So creation begins to repair from the level, the deepest level of pure consciousness, not from the surface level. Just like healing any kind of sickness, repairing anything in the body. If we just put a Band-Aid on it, okay, maybe sometimes we need a Band-Aid. Sometimes we need some Neosporin and stuff on the actual surface. But when we really want to repair something in the body, we go deeper and deeper into its source, into the source of health and well-being within the body. And then we gain balance. And then we have a healing that's sustainable and that lasts. Well, that's the same sort of thing with Tikkun Olam. And this is what happens when we practice spiritual community. There are these pockets of righteousness, pockets of places where people are practicing spiritual community, unified, awake to that unification, awake to that love, and then the consciousness spreads out. So some fascist dictator in some other country, he begins to feel that energy shift, that energy change within his own consciousness. And maybe one day he wakes up and decides it's not a good idea to kill people. It's a better idea to lift people up. And this is an amazing thing. It's a beautiful thing. Just the notion that in our own little families, our own little biotic communities, we can have this love and peace, but then having it where we are creates love and peace in the world, in other places. It's important to understand that in our small communities, where we have what we call shalom, or unity, or peace, it is absolutely not necessary or even desired to have sameness. We've talked about this in the previous lessons. Unity and shalom and peace doesn't mean we all think the same. It doesn't mean we all have the same religion. Doesn't mean we have the same politics. Doesn't mean we like the same bands, like the same food, like the same sports. Maybe your best friend likes the Yankees and you like the Mets. We put aside these differences because those differences are relative differences. We put those differences aside, and with respect, we acknowledge the union between us and that which transcends those things, and the love that transcends those things. Doesn't mean we surrender those differences at all. I'm still a Met fan, you're still a Yankee fan. I still think Moses is a prophet, you still think Muhammad's a prophet. Doesn't matter. But we put aside those differences and we act and we lift each other up from that space of unity that's within us. So I say this again and again because it's very important. People misunderstand what the notion of shalom or unity or well-being is. It doesn't mean that we're all in agreement. It does mean that we agree on one thing, that we lift each other up, that we love each other regardless of those differences, and we practice the golden rule. We've talked about that in the last 3 lessons. So how do we take ourselves out of this circle of harmony and spiritual community? By doing harm, by having an intention to do harm. Then we, by our own choice, take ourselves out of that community. And really, that's an act of mercy on the community's side, because we don't want people being harmed in the community, and also we don't want to enable someone that has bad intention and wishes to harm people. So it's best that that person is not who intends to do harm to others in that circle of community. Aside from that, we transcend, experience that oneness that is within us, lift each other up, and function in that way. And then the ripples from that positive energy, reach out beyond our communities throughout the world in this miraculous way. So the important thing is to practice. We need to transcend within ourselves, let go of the klipot, and experience more and more of that unified field of pure consciousness. And then practice it outside of meditation in our actions with our neighbors and our communities. And have group meditations. And group meditations, like throwing a rock in the pond and the ripples go out way further, a big gigantic rock. So it's a beautiful thing. And it's something that we are responsible for. There's a great saying that's been turned into a song of the Holy Masters that's called Lo Aleka, which is, you're not responsible to complete the work, but you're not free to avoid it. And what does that mean? We don't have to, like I said before, run from continent to continent to see to it that there's help here or peace there or whatever. We don't avoid creating world peace. And how do we not avoid it? By doing what we need to do, connecting to that unified field of pure consciousness and living that way amongst our neighbors and family and friends, having our group meditations and sending out those positive energies. This is not just conceptual. This is a very real thing. There have been actual studies done with groups of meditating people that statistically created peace. So it's something that we can do, believe it or not. We could gather together in New York or in Colorado or in Maine or in California and create peace in Syria. It's something that is not limited by time and space. There are conduits of energy that connect all of us in this way. And it's a great joy to be able to share this beautiful teaching that comes down from generation to generation. So when we look at what do? First of all, we dive in, Yogastha Guru Kamani. We're awake to that unified field of pure consciousness. We acknowledge it in one another. We accept it in one another. We have agreements that we accept it and we uplift one another by the golden rule. We practice together. And then we create Tikkun Olam. It's a very beautiful thing. And thank you very much for joining me with these classes. Feel free to ask through email any questions you might have, or I'm happy to talk to you. You can call me anytime. But thank you and shalom.